When his wife paused and looked at him, John replied, "I understand." John thought that lately he had been saying "I understand" too often, and he was really tired of uttering those words. He wondered how he and Diana, his wife, had even come to this. They had been married for over 22 years. They had 2 wonderful children, both in college. They lived in a wonderful old house that Diana had inherited from her grandmother. Together they renovated the house, adding a pool and a separate garage. The old house now had an open concept layout and a beautifully updated kitchen. He was proud of this home and thought it could rival anything they saw on TV. They also had a great beach house in Hatteras, North Carolina. He resisted making any changes to the traditional beach house he had inherited, preferring to leave it as he remembered it from his childhood. It was a place of so many wonderful family memories. John Simon Thomas was now the Senior Vice President of Central Logistics and was enjoying the fruits of years of hard work. Diana Anderson Thomas had also excelled in her career. She was a Senior Client Relationship Manager at the securities firm Richards & Son, where she had worked for the past 20 years. He thought they had the perfect home, almost perfect children, a great career, and a happy marriage, until he often said, "I understand." But he knew he didn't really understand what was happening in his life. Diana fell silent and looked at him. "Do you understand what I'm trying to say?" "I understand." He hoped she hadn't noticed the note he made on the paper in front of him. He looked at the paper. 32 marks. Over the past 2 days he had said, "I understand" to his wife 32 times. It was time to put an end to these debates. "So we finally agreed," said Diana. "I'm going to step outside our marriage once to experience this." She stopped, seeing John shaking his head. John looked Diana in the eyes and replied, "I will never cheat on you, and I won't agree for you to cheat on me." "I have never cheated on you," Diana exclaimed. John continued, "I am willing to forgive for the deception you have committed up to this point, but now that's it." "I have never cheated on you," Diana provocatively replied. "Yes, you have cheated, at least in my view. And if you are honest with yourself, you know it. You've had dinner with him alone several times. He's met you for girls' nights out several times and turned those evenings into actual dates. You've had extensive text exchanges with him, especially on weekends." John paused and looked deeply into her eyes, causing Diana to lower her head. Now he has a deluxe room booked at the Jefferson Hotel and 2 seats reserved for their Sunday brunch. His intentions are clear. You've got a bold new dress hidden deep in your closet. A Victoria's Secret bag filled with new lingerie. I assume it's just for his eyes since you've hidden it from me. Your intentions are also quite clear. John paused and waited for a response that never came. He continued, "I'm going to make this very simple. I want to make sure we both understand what needs to happen. I'm offering 2 options. This Saturday morning, I'm heading to the beach house. I'll stop by Virginia Diner for breakfast and then hit the beach. I'd like you to come with me. We can spend the weekend discussing our issues and figuring out if we can salvage our marriage. It would be nice if you returned the lingerie you bought for him and picked out something for us to have fun with." John paused, trying to gauge Diana's reaction. And again, he couldn't read her thoughts, something he had never had trouble with until recently. "Your other option is to proceed with your plans for Saturday. Go meet David Summers at the Jefferson Hotel, have a nice romantic dinner at the restaurant, dance at the club, and return to Jefferson to make your affair complete." "Look at me." She slowly lifted her head. "You can go ahead with your plans. You won't need my permission because the moment I leave without you on Saturday morning, our marriage will be over." Diana looked stunned at John. How did he know about their weekend plans? She began to speak slowly. Before she could utter a word, John said, "In case you're wondering, I have friends where you work. You have friends at work who are concerned about you. And finally, David Summers doesn't have any real friends at all." Diana paused as John's words sank in. Then she tried to take control. "I've been a faithful wife and partner to you for 22 years. No, you've been a faithful wife for 21 years and 10 months. You've been cheating on me since your first dinner with David Summers." "I have never cheated on you," Diana pleads. "You've already had a tryst with him," John began. Diana jumped up and cut him off. I have never cheated on you! With a sadness that surprised Diana, John continued, I've seen the betrayal in your eyes, eyes that were always locked onto mine when we made love, eyes that now shut, a face that turns away from mine in bed. How many times have you been with him when we made love? John chuckled sadly. We used to fantasize about threesomes with another woman or another man. I suppose you've managed to make that fantasy a reality. Our bed has been crowded for the past few months. I won't speak of it anymore, do you understand? Diana realized things were not going as she planned. She tried to regain control. John, we have a wonderful marriage. I value our relationship and your love more than anything in the world. Together we've raised 2 wonderful children. We have great careers, and if we stick to the plan, we'll be able to retire early and truly enjoy life and each other. I've been faithful to you, and I'm ready to be by your side as a loving wife until the end of our days. I'll give you all the remaining days of my life. I just need 1 day for myself, and 1 night for him, came John's quick response. Diana lowered her gaze and shook her head, then looked at John. I could have simply acted behind your back. I could have lied to you, but I wanted to be open and honest with you. I thought after all these years you would understand. John quickly replied again, I understand. And as for lying and acting behind my back, that's exactly what you've been doing for the past few months. You've been going on dates with him under the guise of girls' nights out. You've had intimate dinners with him, holding hands and allowing his hands to roam your body, access to which should be mine alone. And worst of all, you've brought him into our bedroom, replacing me with thoughts of him. You've allowed him to intrude on our time with hundreds of messages, not to mention sexting. Diana, I know everything, and how I found out doesn't matter. What matters is that you understand what I'm talking about. Do you understand? Diana just stared at him with eyes he no longer understood. He sighed quietly, realizing she didn't grasp what she was throwing away. John got up and left the room. He went to their bedroom, brushed his teeth, and tried to sleep. But he knew it would be difficult to fall asleep tonight. Diana sat still for a few minutes. Finally, she moved to the couch, picked up her phone, and called her friend Janice. When Janice answered, Diana said, John knows everything. He knows about David and our plans for this weekend. Janice replied, That doesn't sound good. Please tell me you're going to cancel it. Diana answered softly, I don't know how I can. I promised David and he spent so much money on this weekend. Janice quickly replied, You made promises to John before, if you don't remember. I do. I was your maid of honor. Summers can cancel everything and it won't cost him a penny. Besides, that's no reason to cheat on John. I won't cheat on John, Diana repeated. You are cheating, Janice replied. When I told you what George and I did, I was trying to make sure you understood that I would never do it without his permission. Plus, I told you we chose the man together and made sure he was someone we'd never see again. I told you that we did everything right, but we still have problems we're trying to solve. You decided to sleep with a colleague and are trying to justify it. Now Janice pleaded, Please forget about this plan. Stop seeing David, get on your knees and apologize to John. Diana softly replied, But I need this. I really need to experience another man once in my life. David is a good guy, and the women at work say he's good in bed. A good guy wouldn't sleep with a married woman, Janice asserted. Think about what you're risking just to become another notch on his bedpost. I won't be just another notch on his bedpost. He cares about me, Diana insisted. Janice wanted to scream into the phone. Don't you realize that's even worse? I met David at my bachelorette party. He's a nice guy, but he's nowhere near who John is. You should understand that, right? I understand, Diana whispered. Janice pleaded, Please think long and hard about your decision. It will affect everyone you love for the rest of your life. Diana quietly said, I thought you would understand. I thought you, of all people, would understand why I need to do this. Janice tried to reach her friend once more. Diana, the problem isn't that I don't understand. The problem isn't that John doesn't understand. The problem isn't that your kids or your parents or your friends won't understand. The problem is that you don't understand. I beg you not to do this. Diana replied firmly, Well, John knows what I've been doing up to this point, and he didn't stop me. He won't like it, but he'll let me do it. He'll understand how important it is to me. And now I need to get some sleep." After ending the call, Janice turned to her husband, George. "She didn't understand a word of what I said. I'm so sorry I told her about our experience." George replied, "I thought we agreed to keep that strictly between us." Janice looked somewhat embarrassed. "I needed to talk to someone about the problems we've been having. I never thought it would give her any ideas." George hugged Janice and said, "I know, and I'm not mad. I have to admit, I also talked to John about our problems." Janice hung her head in obvious embarrassment. "You told John? I can imagine how he reacted. Did he suggest throwing me out or branding me as an adulteress?" "I thought you knew John better. He asked me a series of questions. My answers made me think about us. After I finished answering his questions, he said to me, 'You two got into this together. You made this decision together. That turned out to be a big mistake, but you two did it together, and only you two can fix that mistake,' he said. 'As long as we continue to be together, work on our relationship together, everything will be fine.' He made me realize that we got into this together, and we both tried to solve our problems. That might be why we're still married." Janice began to cry. She said quietly, "That might be why we're married, and we might be the reason he gets divorced." George shook his head, embracing his wife. "Don't blame yourself if they break up. John is right. If they can't handle this together, they don't stand a chance." Diana slipped into bed and realized John wasn't sleeping. He turned his back to her, and they both moved to opposite edges of the bed. There were 2 feet between them, but the distance seemed measured in miles. They got up to the alarm and went about their morning routines without saying a word to each other. After Diana left for work, John relaxed for a moment and checked the list he held in his hands. Today and on Monday, he took leave from work. John went through every room in the house, photographing each room and its contents. He compiled an inventory catalog of each room and marked items he wanted to keep. He copied all their wedding and family photos from the cloud onto a flash drive. He left their wedding album on the coffee table, unable to open it. The apartments he looked at were nice, but he knew he would miss this home. He would cherish all the beautiful memories, but he would miss being here. He would miss the woman he couldn't stop loving and the life they built together here. John went to a meeting with Sandra Lewis, who came highly recommended to him. The settlement she proposed was very simple and clear. Diana would get the house and her retirement plan. John would keep the beach house and his retirement plan. He would pay off her car and all the credit cards. Part of their investment accounts would be set aside for college tuition and $10,000 for each child as a charitable fund. Then they would split the remaining funds 50-50. John looked up after reviewing the settlement offer and simply nodded. Sandra said, "We can file the papers Wednesday morning." John nodded again, stood up, shook her hand, and left the office. Sandra Lewis realized that her client had said very little to her since hiring her for his divorce. All their communication had been through email. She sensed sadness and resignation in him. Sometimes she wondered why she chose family law as her specialty. John headed to the bank. He opened a separate account, transferring half of the old account to his new one. He emailed a form for direct deposit changes to his company's HR department. Later, at home, he would switch his payments to his new bank account. Then he went to their investment banker. He confirmed that both their signatures would be required for all accounts and transfers. John informed him that his lawyer, Sandra Lewis, would freeze those accounts the next day after Diana was served. John felt uncomfortable with the expressions of pity and concern on the faces of his longtime advisors. He realized they were just the first of many acquaintances who would have the same expression when the news got out. The thought of having to tell his kids about the divorce almost made him nauseous. Diana tried to avoid David Summers as much as possible at work. They met for lunch at Maria's, a small restaurant he liked to call their place. She was quiet and refused to hold his hand. John was aware of their every move, and she couldn't shake the feeling all day that they were being watched. David Summers paid no attention to Diana's mood. "I'm excited about this weekend. Hotel check-in is at 3 p.m. Do you think we could meet a little earlier than planned?" Maybe we could have some fun in the room before going out to dinner, he said. I don't think so, Diana replied restrainedly. Back in the office, Diana tried to get some work done but kept scanning the office. She realized at least one, if not several, of her colleagues were acting as spies for John. After a couple of unproductive hours, she shut down for the day and left the office. Walking down the hallway, Diana greeted two new interns in her department. She stopped and glanced at them, unable to miss the distinctive Central Logistics logo on one of their sweatshirts. John completed all the tasks on his list. It was 2 p.m., and he realized he hadn't eaten all day, so he decided to grab a snack. As he sat down at Maria's cafe, the owner came out and greeted him with a hug. John hugged her tightly and asked, "How's Ben doing?" "He's doing great. He made the baseball team as a rookie. He's so excited. You know James was a great workout partner for him this winter. Your son really made a difference," Maria replied. "Well, James is thrilled that his roommate will be on the team with him," John responded. Maria sat down next to John and said, "They were here for lunch again today, but Paradise wasn't all good. Diana was very nervous, and of course Summers didn't notice a thing." "He may be clueless, but he's planning on sleeping with her this weekend," John said, dismayed. "Don't be too quick to write her off. She must be a special woman if you were married for so long. She'll realize her mistake, and I just pray it happens sooner rather than later," Maria replied. "So, Maryland-style crab cakes with broccoli?" John smiled for the first time that day. "It sounds perfect. And maybe some beer for a change. Surprise me with one of your light ales." Diana returned home earlier and began to implement her backup plan. She planned to cook John's favorite dinner and then try to talk to him again. It was important to her that he agreed to her one-time date. If he didn't agree to that, she needed him to at least accept her actions. When the crab cakes were done, she went upstairs and changed. She wanted to look good for him, and then planned to meet Janice and her other friend Lisa to have a drink and discuss the important day on Saturday one last time. She retrieved clothes and bags from her closet and headed to her car, carefully placing them in the trunk. She didn't want to put John or herself in an awkward position by exposing them to him. John came home at his usual time and was surprised to smell dinner cooking. Diana entered the living room and handed him a bottle of light beer. "Please take off your jacket and tie and sit down. Dinner will be on the table in a couple of minutes." John smiled at the sight of Maryland crab cakes and steamed broccoli she brought him. He was glad as it was his favorite dish, but for the first time, he realized he would prefer to eat at Maria's cafe. At that moment, he would prefer to be anywhere but home. While they ate in silence, Diana decided to try once again to make him understand why she needed to do this. "John, I love you and I hope you understand why." John interrupted her. "I understand. You look very nice today. Are you going somewhere?" "Yes, I'm meeting Janice and Lisa to grab a couple of drinks later tonight. But I'm trying to tell you I love you and I rely on you." Yes, you hope I understand," John coldly said. "I truly understand." He stopped eating and pushed his plate away. Standing up, he said, "I've lost my appetite." As he left, he told her, "You look very nice for him. I guess you couldn't wait until tomorrow. When you see David Summers tonight, tell him to drop dead for me." John disappeared into the living room, and the sound of the TV filled the dining room. Diana sat quietly at the table, holding her head in her hands. For the first time, she seriously reconsidered her actions. A few minutes later, she got up and cleared the table. It wasn't the time to hesitate. She needed to stay true to her feelings. She texted Janice, "Can we meet earlier? I'm leaving in 5 minutes." John heard the front door open and close. He finished his beer and stared at the TV, realizing he had been sitting there for 20 minutes and had no idea what channel he was watching. He felt the weight of sadness pressing on his chest, making it almost impossible to breathe. John pulled a box out of his coat pocket. He popped 2 pills into his mouth and washed them down with the remains of his beer. For the first time in his life, he took a sleeping pill. He knew he wouldn't be able to fall asleep without some help. He also knew he would need all his strength for Saturday morning. Diana approached the bar first and reserved a table for 3. While waiting, She observed the scene in the bar. Men and women were dancing a seductive dance, but to Diana it seemed like a dance of desperation and loneliness. Was this her fate? Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of her friends. Diana watched as her two friends approached the table. She noticed that they seemed tense, preparing herself for their attack. Lisa sat down and looked at Diana. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Have you lost your mind? Are you planning to cheat on your husband with some piece of shit? A bastard from work? Are you going through menopause, or have you started taking drugs? Or did you hit your head? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard from anyone, and I used to think you were one of the smartest people I know. If you go through with this, you must be the dumbest piece of crap I've ever met." Diana simply replied to her friend, "Good evening to you too, Lisa. Yes, I'm fine. And how about you?" Lisa just looked at her. Diana could see anger and pain in her eyes. Diana turned to Janice. "Your turn." Janice shook her head. "You know how I feel about this adventure of yours. I would say more, but I'm afraid I won't be as polite as Lisa." Diana smiled sadly. "You think you could swear better than Lisa?" Janice replied without a smile. "Well, no one can swear better than Lisa, but she missed words like bitch, cheater, adulteress, idiot, and maybe the worst of all disappointments. But there's one thing I really need to tell you. I think you're about to make the biggest mistake of your life, but I love you, and I'll be here to help you, no matter what you do." Lisa just shook her head. Damn, what you want to do is so wrong and so stupid, but I'll be here for you too. Just so you know, I'll be saying I told you so again and again." Diana hugged her friends. "Thank you for your love. I know you can't support what I'm doing, but it's wonderful to know that I can count on both of you after this. You both know I don't do things halfway. I've taken on a commitment, and it's time for me to see it through to its natural conclusion." Lisa pleaded softly. "Diana, there's nothing natural about cheating, and commitment to cheating is the opposite of the true meaning of commitment." Diana sat quietly for a few minutes, then got up and said, "I need to finish my errands for tomorrow. I'll bring a bottle of wine. Please stay and have a drink for me." Diana completed her tasks and drove to the dark house. She gathered her thoughts, then sent Janice a long text message. She knew Janice was angry with her, but she also knew her friend would help her. She opened the trunk of her car. She realized she couldn't leave her purchases in the car overnight. It would be too cold tomorrow to wear them. She hid them in the closet downstairs. After that, she slid into bed next to John and tried to fall asleep. Sleep eluded Diana that night. Finally, at 3 a.m., she got out of bed and went downstairs. She saw the wedding album on the coffee table and thought if John could look at their wedding album, then so could she. After flipping through 2 pages, she closed the album and cried. She had to make him understand. At 5 a.m., she gave up on the idea of sleep and went to the bathroom to take a shower. After the shower, she put on some lingerie from VS, then opened her clothing bag and put on a beautiful item from it. She retrieved the suitcase she had packed earlier and took it to the car. Then she placed her Victoria's Secret bag next to the suitcase. She went to the kitchen and wrote a short note to John, smirking to herself as she left him a note from Dear John. She placed the note on the coffee maker, turned off the light, and headed to the car, determined to finish what she had started. John woke up and looked at the clock. It was 6:15, and when he turned over, he realized he was alone. The thought crossed his mind that she hadn't waited for tonight. She had been pushed to David Summers. He pictured her in David Summers' bed, and the image shook him to his core. For the first time, he questioned himself. Should he have just let her have one night to experience another man? She had promised to belong only to him after that one night. Had he lost the happiness of a lifetime because of his ego and pride? Reflecting on his dire situation, John realized he could never love her again if she went to David Summers. He had lived with her putting her children first, because that's what a mother should do. But he could never live with her putting another man above her husband. In 22 years, they both earned each other's respect and loyalty. She didn't expect anything less. He wouldn't accept anything less. He hoped she was home. Maybe she was sleeping in one of the other bedrooms. John checked all the bedrooms and found no signs of her returning home that night. Entering the kitchen, he saw the note on the coffee maker. He opened the letter and read the short note. "Please understand." That's all she wrote. Collapsing back onto one of the kitchen chairs, John cried. He feared it, but deep down still hoped she would stay, forget this crazy idea, and remain his wife. After making coffee, he headed upstairs. Quickly showering and dressing, he packed a bag with some clothes and went downstairs. John filled his thermos with coffee and headed to the front door. Casting one last long look at the house that had been his home, he turned off the light and closed the door. The cold morning air hit his face as he descended the steps. He realized he forgot to start the car, but thought the cold might help wake him up and maybe snap him out of the stupor he'd been feeling. Approaching his car, he noticed the engine was running. Opening the rear door to stow his bag inside, he saw a suitcase and a Victoria's Secret bag on the back seat. In the passenger seat, he saw Diana, sleeping in the car. Quietly closing the rear door, he paused, reaching for the door handle. Tears of joy streamed down his face at the sight of his wife, his love. Now he knew they had a chance. John took a deep breath and opened the car door. As he got into the car, Diana stirred and looked at John. "Good morning," she whispered softly, rubbing her eyes. "Morning," he replied. After a brief pause, he asked, "How long have you been here?" Diana glanced at her watch and answered, "About 2 hours. I couldn't sleep. Then I got worried you'd leave without me. So I decided to wait in the car. I filled up the gas tank and bought us a dozen cream-filled donuts for the road." John opened the box of donuts and said, "There are only 7 donuts here." Diana finally woke up and replied, "A dozen was for both of us, and I've already had my share." Smiling, John grabbed one of the donuts and let it melt in his mouth. "This'll hold me until we grab breakfast at the Virginia diner. How about their country ham and biscuits with gravy?" Diana shook her head. "I'm not dressed for the Virginia diner." Confused, John asked, "Diana, there's no dress code at the Virginia diner. You can wear anything there." Diana smiled. "I know you can wear almost anything there, but you can't wear almost nothing." Finishing her sentence, she opened her coat to reveal a purple lingerie set to John. "Well, that's almost nothing," John agreed. "Is that coat new?" Diana replied, "Yes, I changed out of my dress into this gorgeous coat. Just in case you didn't check the Victoria's Secret bag, I returned the other lingerie and bought these specifically for you." Diana placed her hand on his chin, lifting his head to look into her eyes. "This outfit and the body underneath it are meant for your eyes and your eyes alone, for all the days and nights of our lives." After a brief pause, she continued, "I regret the hell I've put you through these past few months. You were right about almost everything. There were only 2 things you were wrong about. Last night, I dressed up for you and no one else, and I did actually meet with Janice and Lisa. The second thing you were wrong about was that when we made love, I was doing it with David. David never entered our bedroom. I didn't close my eyes to think of him, but I couldn't look at you because I was so ashamed of what I wanted to do. I'm ashamed to admit that the shame I felt didn't stop me from planning to be with him." She looked at him and said quietly, "Now I really understand." He kissed her. They had a lot to talk about, and they had a lot of work ahead to repair their marriage, but his heart leapt for joy when he realized she finally understood. Passing by the Virginia diner, John glanced at Diana. She'd fallen asleep again shortly after they got on the highway. He recalled everything he had done on Friday. There was a lot to talk about, and he realized that any honest conversation must include his confession. John remembered that evening 7 years ago. He was in San Francisco for the quarterly corporate meeting. At the time, he was the head of the department, and his affair brought the company enormous success. Foreign companies were buying up their American competitors, but John saw an interesting opportunity. He advocated for the idea of buying an Italian company with excellent engineers but serious financial problems. His mentor, the CEO, approved the purchase, and it was highly successful. The purchase brought them several teams of experienced engineers. A major plus was access to the European market that this company provided the rest of the corporation, and the solid presence of the Italian company in the Chinese market. Ultimately, The deal brought in billions of dollars. It was the crowning achievement of the CEO's career and put John on the fast track of corporate success. That evening, Diana was home in Virginia with the boys at the school band concert, so John celebrated his success with his colleagues and especially with Debbie Maris, a lovely marketing representative from another division. Debbie and he had a long-standing business relationship of friendly flirting. He drank just enough to loosen his inhibitions, but not enough to dampen his libido. They danced much closer than a married man should with anyone other than his wife. She pressed against his leg and rubbed him through his pants. Then they headed to her room. In the elevator, they kissed. Debbie threw him her blouse as the elevator door opened, and they quickly made their way to her room. But John couldn't move. He realized it was physically impossible for him to enter that room. He knew his arousal had left him. For the first time in hours, he thought about his wife and wonderful family waiting for him at home. He looked at the lovely Debbie Maris and couldn't think of a single reason to go into the room. He took 2 steps back, then ran, literally ran, back to the elevator. He went to his room and took a shower, wanting to rid himself of Debbie's scent. It was 1 a.m. in their Richmond home, but he called Diana. He needed to hear her voice. After a few rings, she sleepily answered. John assured Diana that he was okay and nothing bad had happened, then delivered the good news. He told her about the success of his venture and the substantial raise. He cried as she excitedly told him how proud she was of him and how she always knew he would succeed. She told him how much she loved him. Through tears, he realized he had almost shared one of the greatest moments of his life with the wrong woman. Diana's opinion and happiness were all that mattered to him. As John drove to the beach, he knew he had to tell her. He had to make her understand why he truly understood her feelings. He had been in her shoes, and that's why he could listen to her and honestly say, "I understand." Once Diana was fully back emotionally with the family, David Summers ceased to hold any interest for her, John, or the author. But curious minds want to know. David Summers sat alone in Fred Davis's office at Richards & Sons. Fred was the vice president of human resources, and David was sent to his office as soon as he arrived that Monday morning. He didn't understand why he was here. Sure, he had recently missed a couple of deadlines in pursuing Diana, but he felt he could quickly make up for lost time. The meeting threw off his plans for the morning. He needed to talk to Diana about what happened over the weekend. Not only had she set him up, but she also sent 2 of her friends, Janice and Lisa, to tell him about it. David remembered being afraid of that woman, Lisa. His father had served 25 years in the Navy, but he was no match for how this woman could curse. She embarrassed him right there in the lobby of the Jefferson Hotel. He remembered even the hotel security seemed reluctant to intervene. As he turned to leave, he froze, seeing a photograph on Fred Davis's desk. It was a family portrait of Fred, his 3 sons, and a smiling wife. Now he knew the name of the woman who had berated him so thoroughly. Lisa Davis. Now he understood why he was here.